And welcome back to the Ramp Up to Retirement podcast with your host, Dan Reese. Dan, good to see you. How are you, my friend?
I am great. I'm excited about the topic today because it's going to pull back the curtain a little bit, like the Wizard of Oz, as to what actually goes on compared to what a lot of people think goes on in a true financial planning and investment firm. So this should be fun.
Well, it should be, because this is about those annual meetings, which most people probably try to. You know better than me. I think a lot of people think, well, okay, I'm going to go in and I'll meet with Dan, and then I'm going to get out of there, and I don't know what Dan does the rest of the year, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, and that actually is what a lot of people might think, and it's like so much of what we do with financial planning and tax planning is kind of done behind the scenes. It's work that basically a client doesn't have to be right there with you when you're doing it. And we thought it'd be a great idea just to share with people, kind of the system we use, and it's all based around an annual service calendar. And so obviously part of that is having reviews, face-to-face reviews with clients as we discuss things. But a big chunk of it actually happens, behind the scenes, and the whole office is involved. It's not just like the advisor, there's support people, there's, everybody working for the benefit of the client. So it should be fun to kind of talk about that stuff.
Yeah, and I want to start with systems. Most people think process systems are boring things, but Dan, that's not always true, is it?
Well, we've talked a lot. Anybody that's listened to this show, I think, understands the complexities around planning.
Yes.
Everything you do has consequences. There's so many moving parts with investments, estate planning, taxes, distributions, contributions, all these different things around money. And they're all encompassed by people, right? So like, you look at how complex that scenario gets quickly. And, you can't plan efficiently if you just wing it. I mean, if you do, sometimes some things will work out well. Other times they don't. And I equate it to even if you're planning a vacation. People that travel a lot, we have clients that travel a lot, They have a system, as to how they go about figuring out where they're going, scheduling where they're staying, like food they're eating, things they're doing. They have a system. Because what they found is when they just go wing it, some crazy stuff can happen, right? And end up maybe sleeping in a car one night. So
we don't want to do that. No.
Yeah. So systems really drive good outcomes in many things in life. And so this is no different.
Yep. I can tell you good systems matter enormously. And so let's start. And if we're going to go through a calendar and begin looking at things, we're in winter now. So this seems like, why don't we start where we're at right now, Dan? What goes on at this time of year?
Yeah, and I think it's good. So the reason we break our service calendar into seasons because people can relate to that, and it helps us. So the whole office is focused on, the winter season and the things we need to do during that time. And one of the things that's so challenging around financial planning and tax planning and investment management, taxes specifically are tied to a calendar year, right? And so it's really, you really have to pay attention to the year at the very beginning in January, because you only have so much time to accomplish your tax planning goals. And so there's a lot going on. So the winter season in our annual service calendar really there's a lot around taxes. So we need to, first of all, we look at what happened last year. We use some software to help us put together what are called tax letters that look at, did you do qualified charitable distributions? Did you do Roth conversions? Did you give money away to kids or charity and things like that?
Yeah.
So all these different things that can happen tax-wise, we keep track of them throughout the year. And then we have some letters that bring it all together so we can look at them and know exactly what's happened for that client from a tax perspective. So that's looking back in January. But then we add in things like, hey, let's look at what are your income needs this year, right? What are distributions? If you have required distributions, what are those amounts? How are we going to take those this year? Are you in a situation where you have high pre-tax IRA balances where we need to look at Roth conversions, which we've talked about before? As those play in, so we're trying to identify right early in the year who may be candidates for that and who we need to start looking at for, having those conversations. And then on the flip side, if you're working, what about your retirement contributions? How are, you'll hear a lot of good advice where they'll say, hey, it's January, bump it up 1%, things like that. But nowadays, it's also what type of account are you saving to? Are you saving to Roth accounts, or are you saving to pre-tax? Do you have after-tax options in your plan? Do you have an HSA account? All these things that you really need to figure out in January, because you're going to be funding those things the rest of the year, right? So that's kind of like in a nutshell, what's going on right at the beginning of the year. There's a lot of math and a lot of identification of, who needs what in who's going to, what are their planning needs going to be throughout the year. So that's really that winter season is figuring all that stuff out.
Yeah, I mean, it is the proverbial getting off on the right foot, making a good, strong step out and being organized so that stuff doesn't get crazy a little bit later, right?
Well, and one of the things, too, we've talked about Roth conversions a lot on this show. So one thing we don't ever know, we don't know when market downturns are going to occur.
True.
So if we've earmarked someone as a good candidate to consider Roth conversions on the year, then when we have a market downturn, we can pull out that list of everybody that fits that criteria and say, oh, Joe and Susie and Beth and all these different people that, fit that criteria, we can get on, look at their accounts, give them a call and say, hey, we've had a market drop. This might be a good time to execute some Roth conversions while it's down. So that's why that foundational stuff is just so important, because otherwise you're just running, with your hair on fire when all of a sudden a market downturn hits or something like that. So
that makes total sense. So what comes next?
Well, then spring, which everybody loves spring, right?
I love spring, yes.
You're hoping your taxes are done, but this is when we get into really the semi-annual investment deep dive. We're looking at portfolios, making sure that, they're still aligned with the client's needs, that they're performing as expected, if there are any changes that need to be made. We're looking at possible tax strategies, things like tax loss harvesting. Are there some positions in the portfolio we could sell at a loss to be able to have some, loss carry forward to offset gains when those things come up? Overall, how are these after-tax accounts invested? Are there things we can do to improve the tax efficiency of those? Also, updating financial plans, looking at, hey, how's your plan actually working? Does everything still look good and on track? And that's springtime for that. And then we kick into spring review meetings. So a lot of our clients will come in at that time. Taxes are done. They have an idea of kind of where they're going that year. They've got through winter and might have an idea of what extra spending needs they could have that year. And then finally, we look at the estate plan review just to make sure, we're always checking beneficiaries. Hey, has anything changed in your life? Do you need to revisit your estate planning in general? Anything with, possible special needs that's not being addressed, healthcare needs that may need to be addressed, a lot of things like that around estate planning. And that's really that spring refresh time, right? And so that's why we all those types of things fit in there just to make sure things are going as they should be.
Well, very good, because as sure as spring, summer follows. And I love summertime. I think, I think of it as being a fairly less crazy, quieter time of the year, but I don't know what it's like for you, Dan.
Yeah, summer's a time where we really get a lot of important things accomplished for clients. Typically, we don't have a lot of meetings in the summer because we're in Michigan and people want to be out doing other things, right, than coming in and seeing us.
It's not cold there, yeah.
Yeah. And we have, our employees would like some time off too when it's nice out. So it's like we generally don't see as many people in the office during that period. But what we are doing is we're reviewing a lot of tax returns. So tax returns are done. Those are coming in. We run them through our tax software, create reports, send those out to clients so they kind of see where they sat the prior year. That really helps us identify if we've missed anything in our initial review in winter around their tax planning for that year. Because, tax returns just things that people forget about and they show up. And our reports show a lot of good stuff. And then we do start doing some scenario analysis. So what that means is that now we've got last year's taxes. We identify any changes from last year to this year. And then we can start looking at if someone was looking at a Roth conversion, what does that look like if we add that onto their income this year? If people need some special distributions for maybe some purchases, looking at which accounts to pull those things out of, now that we've got some more information along those lines. Overall, making sure any goals that they have that are fitting in from a tax perspective. And I do want to comment that you'll hear us say a lot about taxes as we talk about this stuff.
Yep.
And the reason is that your taxes, they're just lockstep with everything around your finances. You know what I mean? So like you can't really do anything with money without considering taxes. And if you do stuff with money without considering taxes, oftentimes you get bad outcomes.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a bad ending. It's not good.
Right. So that's why you hear us talk so much as we're talking about a service calendar. You hear us talk a lot about going back to the tax return, going back to the tax projection, factoring in something as simple as, hey, I need to buy a car this year, and I've got a choice between taking it out of my brokerage account or taking it out of my IRA, or maybe even taking it out of my Roth. Where should I get the money from? Well, part of that is like running scenarios. So we look at where their income's going to be. What happens if we take it from here and realize some capital gains? What happens if we take it from here and have earned income, our income from an IRA? Or what happens if it's from a Roth where it's tax-free, which is generally nice. You don't have any major taxes there, but you don't want to use that money unless you have to. So those types of things are all kind of happening in the summer as we have time to kind of dive deep into some of those more complicated tax areas.
Very interesting. Yeah, no, that's true. And it's building up to the fall, which I would imagine starts to get fairly busy around your office.
Yeah, fall is a very busy time because, like I said before, we work in a calendar year for taxes, for a lot of things, right? Your required distributions come in that calendar year, have to be out by December. A lot of our clients do qualified charitable distributions out of their IRAs, and many people do those later in the year, as they're kind of seeing how things have gone and maybe how much excess they have to give to charity and things. And so there is just a lot of stuff going on. We tend to, the core things we're doing in that fall season, we'll look at insurance reviews. So, just making sure that clients, whether, we kind of alternate every year. So one year we'll do long-term care and property and casualty, your car and house stuff, and just make sure there's no issues there. And the other year we'll look at things like your health insurance, Medicare, life insurance, things like that. Because it's just, you don't necessarily have to review those every single year, but you want to make sure you don't go more than 2 years without keeping an eye on those so that you can at least make sure, like if you have life insurance, do I still need it? Is the policy outdated where maybe I can improve it? There's a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
Car insurance is one of those things that people tend to kind of buy it and forget it. So they don't know what their liability limits are. And, do I have enough coverage there and all that kind of stuff.
That is so true.
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, to me is that going through this, you've covered a lot of things that you and your office do for your clients.
Yeah.
And so I'm struck by the fact that it's like we're going back to the beginning of this conversation now for a second, which this is a lot of stuff, but when it's organized and approached through a system, it's not, things don't get crazy. Things aren't overwhelming, it seems.
Yeah. I think too, when you think about this, not for the most part, not every person needs all these things, right? So part of doing a good job for us is, we spend a lot of time getting our clients organized so we know what's valuable for what person. And that's super important because, you want really to customize that annual service calendar for each client so you make sure you're giving them what's going to give them the most benefit. You don't want to, like you said, you were joking around, I think, at one point is saying, hey, I don't want to go into a review where there's, I'm basically bored. Like, I'm like, yeah, we're doing fine. See you next year. Right?
Yes.
And nobody wants that. And so when you think of the annual service calendar, it's a way to, number one, organize everything. But then it's also a way to kind of organize clients and say, this is, Joe needs this, Susie needs that, and make sure that you're focusing on the things that are really going to help them be successful. Because that's really what it's about. It's about clients. It's not about us, and how can they have the most success. And so that's where those conversations come in. And late in the year, it's interesting because that's where you get into the grind of, okay, we don't have much time left. The final tax review, the final Roth conversion things, getting up, making sure all the required distributions are out, making sure those qualified charitable distributions, they've got the checks so they can bring those into the charity of their choice. Doing year-end review meetings, just tidying everything up because before you know it, it's January. And once it's January 1st, there's a lot of things you can't do for the prior year, like those Roth conversions and things like that.
Right.
So yeah, it's just an annual keep grinding, you know what I mean? To get, consistently deliver what people need year in and year out.
No, and it's good. And it may seem really boring, but it's not, because I think it brings a lot of peace of mind to everybody that's involved with the process. Actually, there's nobody that doesn't want to know that their financial affairs are shipshape, they're in order, they're organized, and they're boring.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. That's exactly it too, because I remember years ago, a guy had called and was just asking about what we did and everything. And, typically most people in our industry get paid, an asset-based fee. So that, just the average is around 1% a year, right? To manage money, do these things.
Yeah.
And, his comment was, well, I would never pay somebody 1% a year to manage my money. And I said, well, I wouldn't either. I mean, I wouldn't do that either. But I would pay somebody 1% a year to do all the things that we're talking about today. Because, if you're going to do it yourself, you have to have, number one, the knowledge, the tools, the network of professionals to lean on to make sure that you're doing all these things that are going to put you in the best position. And all it takes is a couple mistakes, and that 1% you were going to pay a professional, really, you're going to be like, I would have paid that 1,000 times over. You know what I mean? When you run into problems. And but following like a system, getting back to that, allows you to get the most value. And when you think about this stuff, Bill, like I tell we talk about this around the office all the time. Whatever any client pays us, we want to provide way more than that in value. You know what I mean? Way more in value than what they ever pay us. And the way you do that is by making sure all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed each and every year, and they don't miss opportunities that would help them better their situation, and that's the name of the game year in and year out.
Very good. And if people are listening to this podcast and they don't know you, they haven't had a conversation with you, but they think maybe, hey, this is a good excuse and this sounds like somebody I'd like to talk to, how do they get a hold of you, Dan?
Yeah, first of all, I would highly recommend that we've got actually a piece that lists out our annual service calendar. And if you call our office, we'll get that to you. We'll send that over. You can get to our website. You can put it in.
We can also put it in the show notes, as a matter of fact.
We can put it in the show notes as well, right? And the whole point of this is that I think it helps, because we talk about a lot of stuff. It helps you to really understand a little better what financial planning and investment management is. And because I think a lot of people still sit out there and go, what do these guys really do and these girls doing that are working all the time in this area? Because there seems to be a lot of people that work in finance. And, it does give you a little insight in a broken down way of, what's going on from month to month and quarter to quarter and season to season, if you will. But honestly, check out our website, averywealth.com. There's all kinds of great information out there because this stuff, when you think about it, it's about learning. It's about not necessarily having to do everything yourself. It's about learning of, what is good planning? What is estate planning? What is tax planning? And there's all kinds of resources on our website that talk to those things. And then it's really getting aligned either with a professional, a certified financial planner, and a good CPA and a good attorney and things. Or figuring out, if you're going to do it yourself, creating your own system that's going to work, right? That's going to consistently work for you.
True. But that would involve a lot of work on their part. And if they're not up to doing that, there are certified financial advisors there to help them through it and to walk them through all of the craziness. So I would encourage you, if you don't know Dan, to give him a call and at least have an initial conversation. The other thing, please hit the follow button. Become a subscriber. That way you'll never miss another episode of the podcast. Give it a like. Tell people about it. Word of mouth promotion. Very much appreciated, especially these days when you don't know, frankly, who's recommending that you would like what. So a little personal conversation would be most grateful for. Thank you. So until next time, I'm Bill Tucker. On behalf of Dan Reese and everybody at Avery Wealth, thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you next time. Thank you for listening to Ramp Up Your Retirement. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.averywealth.com or give us a call at 517-783-1695. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Avery Wealth. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. The opinions voiced in Ramp Up to Retirement with Dan Reese are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on the show may not be affiliated with CWM LLC. Views and comments by guests may not be representative of CWM LLC. Investment advisory services are offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Carson Partners, a division of CWM LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors.